Trump, the Iranian economy has reached the stage of death. Washington, Reuters. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Monday that Iran's economy had reached the stage of death. Trump said Iran's economic situation was getting worse and Iran was suffering from total chaos. Trump used to make statements about the collapse of Iran's economy and the country's proximity to the edge to hamper its activities. More recently, the World Bank predicted Iran's economy would contract 3.6% in 2019 against a 1.5% contraction in 2018, and that growth would return 1.1% in 2020 and 2021. Last April, the International Monetary Fund predicted that Iran's economy would shrink by 6% in 2019, from 3.9% in 2018. The U.S. president withdrew from the nuclear deal with Iran in May 2018, reimposed harsh economic sanctions from August, and threatened the countries that deal with them with economic sanctions as well. A second round of U.S. sanctions against Iran, which came into force on November 5, 2018, targeted the oil, energy and gas industries and their products. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani admitted early this year that his country faces the greatest economic pressure since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The Council of Representatives approves a request on the implementation of Article 140 for the equity of the people of the South. July 22, 2019. MP Faleh Al-Khazali, on Monday, obtained the approval of the House of Representatives to approach the government to introduce the subject of the implementation of Article 140 of the Constitution on its agenda. According to a document obtained by Magazine News, this comes half-covered by a specific time ceiling and the federal government to activate the transitional justice laws in the central and southern provinces. Trump praises Chinese president. July 23, 2019. Praised U.S. President Donald Trump, his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, about the recent deal with protests taking place in Hong Kong on the back of the draft extradition law to China for trial. In a very responsible manner with the protests, I know that this is a very important position for President Xi, Trump told a news conference at the White House. China could have stopped it if it wanted to. I think the Chinese president acted responsibly. We are working with China on trade agreements now. We will see what happens, he said. For more than 2 months, Hong Kong has witnessed a series of violent protests, sometimes in the most serious crisis since Britain returned Hong Kong to China in 1997, but with democratic freedoms under the formula of one country, two systems. Iraq pays compensation to Kuwait for the Gulf War. July 23, 2019. The United Nations Compensation Commission paid KNPC $270 million. The committee, based in Geneva, said that the segment increases the amount of compensation paid to Kuwait to $48.7 billion. According to the site Baghdad Today, Iraq has allocated recently 1.5% of the revenues of oil exports to the compensation fund and payments that occur every 3 months. The Commission approved applications for 1.5 million compensation claims submitted by 100 governments and international organizations, all of which were paid for only one. The remaining request, which includes the final payments, originates from KNPC. About $3.7 billion of its $14.7 billion claim for oil production losses and sales resulting from damage to oil fields in the country is yet to be paid. The United Nations Compensation Commission is responsible for claims for compensation stemming from Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, 1990 to 1991. The United Nations has decided to deduct 1.5% of Iraqi oil imports and grant them to Kuwait. July 23, 2019. Walter. Baghdad. The United Nations Compensation Commission decided Tuesday to cut 1.5% of Iraq's oil exports and give it to Kuwait. The decision comes as part of the compensation Iraq must pay to Kuwait for the 1990 to 1991 invasion. The committee has announced a payment of $270 million recently from the Iraq-funded Fund for Compensation, the Associated Press news agency reported. The committee stressed that Iraq will allocate these resources to the fund and is paid once at the end of every quarter economic year, where Kuwait claims that its oil company lost $14.7 billion during the war, which paid Iraq of only $3.7 billion.